We are recording. Hello, welcome. It's David Brownstein. I'm here with Kris Bradley. Hey, Kris.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. Going great. Really glad you're here today. Welcome, everybody, to the Music Evolution Summit. I'm David Brownstein, your host. This is Kris Bradley with the white headphones and orange scratch. For those of you who don't know Kris, I'm going to read her bio here. So Kris Bradley is a Nashville-based songwriter-producer with credits including Sony BMG, Warner Chappell, Rolling Stone, Fox, Lincoln, and Miramax. She heads Boom Fox Productions, located at RCA on historic Music Row, producing for various sync projects, artists, and producers. She's also the founder of Produce Like a Boss, an online coaching program geared towards songwriters, producers, rather than the engineer. Excellent. Her non-techie and simplified style of teaching is helping tons of artists learn how to produce their own music. So welcome, Kris Bradley.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear what we're going to talk about today. First, I want to start with tell me about your own music journey. You got a Gretsch there, got an LA baseball hat. Where have you been just tell us about how you got started, first heroes maybe as a musician.
Oh my gosh, my first heroes go as far back as Glenn Miller and Billie Holiday, ranging into Janis Joplin and Led Zeppelin. And then, it just kept growing from there. I'm kind of a genre mutt. My great-grandmother helped to raise me for the first 8 years of my life. My mom had me pretty young, and we lived with my great-grandma. So I grew up on big band and jazz. And then my mom was a teenager in the 80s. So I got a lot of the 70s and 80s rock, anything from Heart and Zeppelin to Guns N' Roses and Van Halen, into the 80s and 90s, and then so on and so forth. So,
and did that inspire you to sing first or play guitar first? What was your first instrumental?
The first thing I was doing was singing from the crib, and then we had a piano in the house. So the piano was the first instrument for me, and I was playing by ear by the time I was 4 and 5. The first song I learned how to play was In the Mood by Glenn Miller. That's what I learned how to play on the piano. And they tell me that there was this time, I don't know if you know the song Whole Lotta Love, that little breakdown in the middle where it's do 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 do, and it's got the percussion. They said that, and you know how he goes way down inside, he does that big. He said, we just heard you. My mom loves to tell me the story. We heard you. We were rocking out to that song in the house. I heard this baby in the crib, and the baby was way down. That's one of their first memories of me being. They're uh-oh, she's a singer. So
yeah, that's great. So you were born to get down to Led Zeppelin, actually.
I was definitely born to rock.
and you told me you were in a Zeppelin cover band.
Yeah, I was. That was a dream come true in my early 20s because, for a while people would be like, oh, you're the Zeppelin girl, before I was in a Zeppelin band, because I just loved to sing rock and blues. And, that was a lot of stuff that I did already. So it was a good fit.
That's great. That's great. So when you started producing, did you have what inspired you to start producing and to start engineering and start, making music on your computers?
Yeah. So, I definitely did the rock band thing for a good chunk of my 20s, but then I kind of started to turn more into I realized that, depending on 4 people or 5 people in a band, it was like a divorce, with 5 people every time we broke up. And so I was I think I need to go solo and just kind of only rely on myself. That was my first step into trying to becoming self-sufficient, was to just go solo as an artist. And then at that point, I was, studying the craft of songwriting and just trying to get better. And I was, wanting to, and then I did get a little better. And then I was pitching my songs for, opportunities. And I wanted to get my music into film and TV and sync, as well as cut with other artists. And I realized that, quickly, that I needed demos in order to be able to pitch that. And this is before I was even ready to release anything. It was just in order for someone to take me seriously, I cannot hand them a voice memo from my phone, So I decided to, after spending money, it cost me at least $500 every time I wanted to get a demo done. And I was writing faster than my bank account could keep up with, I was I think I need to learn how to do this. So I just kind of dove in. And to be honest, I didn't really have a computer growing up. So I wasn't really familiar with even how to work my way around one. So I was kind of learning the DAW and how a computer worked at the same time. Even simple things like copy paste were completely foreign to me. I didn't have email. So it was an interesting journey, a lot of trial and error, a lot of banging my head against the wall and just being so tech technologically challenged. But I stuck with it. And I think because of the troubles that I faced, and coming from that perspective of singer-songwriter, non-techie, it caused me to come up with these systems to first help myself
Right,
to
right.
make through. And then those things I ended up starting to like teach my friends. And then I started producing artists, and I would talk to the artists. Oh yeah. And give them these little bits of nuggets of information. They're like, you're really good at teaching this. It's really helpful to artists. And then the rest is kind of history from there.
That's great. I love what you said about you were writing faster than your bank account could afford you to
Yeah.
to produce them. That's a great way to put it. That's a
Well, and
great way
not
to
only
put it.
that, when you write these songs that, they're usually not only relevant to, let's say that if you're as writing as an artist, to the where you're at in life or your feelings. But if you want to remove that part and just go in for the professional, like if you're writing to pitch, a lot of times, you're writing in the moment for something that's hot. And it's like how much time goes by before that song's not relevant anymore, not only for that pitch, but that country artist you wanted to pitch that to, or that pop artist is no longer making music like that. So you kind of got to be able to move quickly and keep up
Mm.
with the times. And I realized, like, oh man, in order to be able to work at that speed, I either needed a lot of money, or I needed to learn how to do it myself.
Is there a different mindset from being an artist of yourself, your own artist, your own act, your own band member, and writing for pitches, writing for film and television? Is there a shift? Do you approach it differently, or how? What's your take on that?
I do. I do. I always try to, maintain my authentic voice through everything that I do. You know what? I take away the word try. I insert my authentic voice in whatever I do because I can't help that. But I tend to, I do a lot of like custom work, and clients are hiring me for specific things. I've been hired to write songs for agencies and theme songs and stuff. At that point, this is now a job, and I'm providing a service. And whatever my little artist heart wants to do, it doesn't necessarily get to do all those things. It's kind of like, I still get to color, but now I've made some lines, and I got to color inside the lines now.
Right, right. That's great. That's interesting. I heard Greg Wells. I was at a mixing workshop with Greg Wells over the past summer, and he was saying, well, like when I'm working with Adele or Katy Perry, it's my job. If I was left to my own devices, I would do something else, but it probably wouldn't be very broadly interesting to people.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So, so yeah, so it's great. It's great. So let's talk about, like, I mean, here in this, in this world, in the state the world is in and the music industry is in, where there's no touring right now. Everyone's working at home. Everyone's recording at home. Artists are writing. Artists are recording. I was on a Zoom call recently where Alicia Keys' engineer was saying, I've been helping Alicia set up her home studio now. So everyone's working at home, and it wasn't always everybody's goal or skill set to record at home. And now everybody, from people getting started to people who have been winning Grammys or hosting the Grammys, are learning how to use Logic and Ableton and stuff like that, right? So what's your take on, like, what's important in this time? And my goal for this summit is to help artists, musicians be productive, be creative, and make money. So just speak to the moment as you see it, if you would, please.
Sure. I think that even before it became a necessity, which is what it's at now, where it's at right now with social distancing and everything, that it was something that I still think is so important for every songwriter to learn. Because whether you are trying to release music yourself and you want to be in more control of that and control of your masters, and or whether you're pitching for film and TV, which, by the way, they love to work with people that have home studios, because they're often, when you're working on a brief, they're going to be like, hey, we love this, but can you make this change here, and can you get that to us yesterday? So just being able to work at that speed. Or even, like, let's say you're an independent artist and you are going to go into the big studio. Maybe you're going to do a Kickstarter, right? Well, in order to get people to give you money, how cool would it be if you could show up first and go, here's the demos, like, here's me working out, like, I'm putting the work in, so that when you guys give me the money for the big shots producer, we can go to him with these great songs, and you're also kind of beta testing your market as well. How many times have you gone into the studio and paid a bunch of money to have a song recorded, and then went, oh, I wish I spent money on a different song because that actually great, the producer did a great job, but the song wasn't that strong. Well, this is all stuff that you could totally figure out ahead of time if you could just be doing even basic guitar vocal demos. So then let's put that aside. Let's say you start learning how to record, and what's your instrument that you're already good at? Is it vocals? Is it piano? Is it guitar? learn that first. Make that your main focus. That's some of the best advice I ever got. When I was learning, I was like, I'm going to be a producer and do all these things. My friends like, focus first on getting a clean take of your vocal. You don't even need to learn any of the plugins, reverbs, compressions, EQs. Just get a clean take of your vocal and learn how to be able to export those files, because then you can do session work and you can start making money. And so that's another thing that I can't help but emphasize is, guys, you don't need to, this isn't the 10,000 hour rule necessarily, because you may have already put that into your craft. All you got to
Right,
do is know how to capture that performance. And then for some people, that will be enough. And they'll be like, great, and I'm going to make money doing that. That's what I did, but also was continuing to build my chops as a producer.
well, let me just stop you for a second.
Sure.
Because so many people are now recording vocals at home, and I was just recording vocals over the weekend, and I'm got to be the engineer, and I'm a songwriter, and then I'm not. What are some tips you would say for people recording vocals at home, just to get better vocals?
Yeah.
If you're
So
one man or one woman or whatever, artist, producer, engineer.
yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think of something that I can fit into this conversation quickly. Like
Yeah,
the most
yeah.
important thing, yeah, because I teach all this stuff too, would be gain staging your vocals. I find that that's where artists tend to. I'll give you two things that are really important. Gain staging, which is just making sure that you're not clipping or peaking. So you'll notice that if I turn up this on my, I'm adjusting my preamp right now, you can hear how hot that gets. If you adjust that while you're singing the loudest part of your song to make sure you're never going into the red, that's going to enable you to, not be able to clip and peak. And that's really important, because once that distortion happens going in, you can't fix that afterwards. You can fix a lot of stuff in post. It was a pitchy vocal, no problem. We'll tune it. It was this, it was that, no problem. It was out of time. There's so much that can be fixed in post, but if the source is bad, eh. So another thing is, open your hand, 5 fingers wide, and just spread it like that. And that's usually a good reference for proximity. Is just, from the tip of the microphone to your mouth should be a wide open hand. And then the other thing is, when you're bouncing files to send to somebody else, always make sure that you bounce from 0. People think, oh, the vocal doesn't come in until bar 12, and they just loop from that section, or they bounce from that section, and they don't realize when the other person receives that file, it's going to start at 0 for them. So that now your 12 is their 0, and now everything is out of alignment. So
Right, right.
those would be my two
Oh,
off,
great.
top of my
Oh,
head.
beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Sure.
I like to get the concrete stuff here as
Yeah.
well. So let's say somebody's been writing, but they've never started recording before, right? How would you start? What would you recommend? The way, the process? Just tell me a little bit about. I mean, what I loved about the videos I've seen of yours is that you're taking it really simple. You're taking it from the beginning and demystifying a lot of this stuff that looks very complicated. So tell me a little bit about what you do and how you approach it.
So my approach is like you said, it's really to simplify, and it comes at it from like a singer-songwriter perspective as opposed to the engineer, right? So I'm always looking ahead at like the arrangement. Excuse me, how is this put together? How are we going to map this out in a way, blueprint or roadmap, whatever you want to call it, so that we are just setting ourselves up for success. So the way I like to think of it is this: the way that an author sits down to write a book, or the way that an architect builds a building, they don't just go in and go at it, free form. Maybe there's a little bit of that when they're coming up with ideas, but really there's an outline, or there is a blueprint in place. And that's the way that I structure when I'm teaching a music production. And that's also referred to as pre-production. It's just like, what do we do before the production? Because what happens is, I think artists jump in and they get really excited, as one would, a kid in a candy store. There's all these virtual sounds and instruments and plugins. And it's like, the overwhelm though will cause paralysis, right? Because it's too
Mm-hmm,
much. So it's like, how do
mm-hmm.
we get a game plan together where we're actually going to not just get in here and play and make a mess? It's like throwing paint at a wall. Oh, that's fun. But how are we going to come up with something finished? And that all starts with a game plan. And that's really what I provide, is like this
Mm-hmm.
step-by-step guidance of like, here's how to do it. Here's how to build it, beyond just like, here's a guitar, here's a loop, and here's a vocal. That's not what makes a demo. That's not what makes a great production or recording.
Right,
Actually
right.
into the nitty gritty of like why we would add certain elements and why we would layer certain elements and cover different frequency spectrums as we get into new parts of the music as well.
I mean, do you think it's important to figure it out in advance, or is it okay to be improvisational as the creation process evolves? What do you
I
think?
think it's important to know the difference. Okay, because here's why. If you sit down and you know that you're just being improvisational and you're having fun, I am all about that. I set aside specific time to do that so that I'm not cutting off the muse. It's kind of like free form writing. I'm just going to let anything happen. perfect, great. But don't sit down to create a song and then go, oh, I messed up that. Let's say that the flow is coming. That's what happens when you become a writer producer. So you start hearing, instead of like, oh, I hear a melody, now you're hearing a melody and a drum pattern and a keys part and a guitar part. It's coming really quick. You got to get that out really quick. So, you know, when I'm in the creation process like that, I think it's more important to move past, okay, that wasn't the right snare, but I'll get the right snare later. Let's get the guitar part down. Let's get the piano part down, because if you sit there tweaking a snare for 20 minutes, you're going to lose all the rest of that flow that's coming through. So I think it's just important to know what your intention is when you sit down. Because if
Yeah.
something's flooding through, and this is one of my favorite things. My students said, I was driving home the other day and I got a flood, and it was like, I heard all the parts, and it was so great because when I got home, I could actually execute it all. And that just made
Wow.
me, because that's why I learned how to do this. I wanted to be able to do the same way you hear a melody or a lyric and you get excited and you start writing a song. Being able to do that with an entire production is so empowering, but you got to move quick when it's coming because you won't necessarily remember it all.
I know. I love that you call it a flood. That's what it feels like. It's like, ooh, yeah, I got a bass line, I got a guitar, I got a keyboard, I got a melody, I got a title. What am I doing? And the first thing I do is pick up my voice memo, pick up my phone, start singing into it. I know you've got a module called, or one of your videos is called From Voice Memo to Demo. What's it called?
My course is actually called From Voice Memo to
Oh,
Demo.
okay. So
Go
yeah,
back.
because I love that because that's what it is, right? I wake up in the morning, I've got some songwriting through my head. I find my phone, sing it into it, and then at least I won't forget it while I open up my DAW and start to do the twiddly work in a sense.
Totally.
So I
Totally.
love that you call it. I love that you're calling it a flood.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
well, how I mean, how if people haven't made their own music before, what are some just talk to me about more about how someone who's producing themselves for the first time would want to start to think about it and look at it.
How they'd want to start to think about it and look at it.
Think about making their own music and what they need to learn and what they need to forget about, what they need to focus on, what they need to let go of. I don't know. Just
Yeah,
to tell me a little more about the process that you see.
Yeah, I would say to be gentle with yourself when you're first beginning, let go of perfectionism, allow yourself to be, completely messy and, for lack of better words, allow yourself to suck because you have to be bad before you can be good. You have to be good before you can be great. And oh, let's rewind a little bit. You have to start before you can be bad. So it's like if you're just, I know a lot of people are procrastinating. And one of my favorite sayings is perfectionism is procrastination disguised as productivity. So just start, just get in there. Nobody has writer's block, okay? Nobody. I don't care what you think it is. You don't have writer's block. You have I'm afraid of sucking block. I'm afraid of not writing something perfect block. Just
Hmm.
get in
Hmm.
there and do it and be gentle with yourself.
Well, I was working with a client. I was actually coaching and speaking in Finland, and a woman had written a musical, and she's like, I'm trying to write my next musical, but I've had writer's block, but because I'm afraid everything comes out, it's gonna suck. I'm like, well, that's okay. Just tomorrow, write me 3 songs that suck for tomorrow. And she wrote 5 songs that were good. By we're not worrying about that they were sucking. It was like saying that they're supposed to suck gave her permission to just let it come out, let it come out, let it come out.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned that because that reminds me of somebody. I have a student who's recently just transitioned, I mean, so quickly from learning this stuff to now she's making money singing and doing session work and voiceover work. She just booked her first Audible book. I'm like, yes, girl. But
Wow.
one thing she mentioned when we were talking about writing professionally, like people hiring you to write and stuff, and she was asking me for pointers and I gave her a few and she goes, you know what? She goes, this is actually easier than when I sit down to write for myself because when I sit down to write for myself, it's like this has to be everyone's wanting to write their next epic big thing. But when somebody hires you, it's not that you don't want to do a good job, but it's like, oh, okay, what are the instructions? Okay, if I follow these instructions, I'm doing my job. It really just kind of takes your ego out of it that thinks you need to create, like reinvent the wheel.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
it's funny how scary it seemed to her to take on doing, this professionally, but it actually was less scary because of the instructions provided by the client. I was like, brilliant.
Well, yeah. Sometimes the blank page is good, and sometimes the blank page is like a desert of fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's
Well,
what if it's what if it's not perfect? What if nobody likes it? Who
yeah.
who would you say are some artists who inspire you now, who are maybe making their own music in a different way right now?
Yeah, John Bellion is probably hands down my favorite new modern artist. And I wouldn't even say he's new, but I mean, he's actually just kind of blowing up. So a lot of people might be just hearing about him for the first time. And he produces as well. And his behind the scenes videos of him in the studio and creating is like I want to be you when I grow up. I love it so much.
Really?
And yeah, he's just my hands down favorite. I'm such a fangirl.
What is it about? What is it about those behind the scenes videos that inspire you or
His
are
passion,
memorable?
his
Passion,
passion,
yeah.
just like how happy he is, and you just feel it. He's enthusiastic. It's not even, yeah, his enthusiasm, his passion, and his heart. You just feel it. It's infectious. I love it.
That's great. I've seen that there's the Charlie XCX, the British pop star singer, just released an album of songs that she wrote during the lockdown, just in the last 3 months. She's never worked so fast, she said. She's never done so much collaboration. Producers she's never worked with before sent her tracks and suddenly got inspired. So just there's something kind of fresher, and I like her work a lot. And there's something fresher and more direct and less labored that came out because she was working faster.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that. I mean,
I mean,
I
it's
know.
not. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I There is something, it's interesting. Like sometimes I do this exercise when I sit down and I go, okay, 10 minutes on the timer. You have 10 minutes to create a beat. Try and create a whole track, like a hip hop track, that's like, it's gonna like give me some sections. And what I create in that 10 minutes, as opposed to what I would create if I was just like, okay, I'm gonna do this song and I'm gonna produce it and there's no cap on time, or maybe there's a couple days, is totally different. It's not different necessarily good or bad. It's just it's refreshing. It's different because when you force yourself to make decisions, it's interesting to see what comes as a result of that. I'm actually really interested to hear her record now that you mentioned that that's what she did.
Yeah, and also there were some really long liner notes where she talked about the derivation of each song, and it's like a little tiny text document.
Oh, that's really cool.
It's really great. So yeah, she went from like slick perfectionism to like, okay, here it is, here it is, here it is,
I love that.
um, and
Speaking
more
of
vulnerable in her
Charlie,
lyrics. Say again. Go ahead.
speaking of Charlie's, Charlie Puth is another
Oh
artist
yeah,
self produces who's just wicked talented.
yeah. What do you notice about his work? What inspires you about his work?
He, honestly, it's kind of like one of those. You ever have those like musician friends that you just they're good at everything, and you're I hate you, but I love you.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's the different kind of inspiration, it's just kind of like, okay, you're a unicorn, whatever, but God, I love you.
Right. Right.
Billie Eilish, same thing. Her and Phineas, I believe that's how you say his name. They're bedroom producers and their music is incredible. So
Yeah, what did you learn from the Billie Eilish music records? I love their stuff. I saw them live last year at South by Southwest. What do you learn about them?
that's so cool. Well,
They
I
were so
mean,
great.
I got turned on to Billie Eilish just before she broke it pretty big, and I was like, "Who is this girl?" I didn't even know they were bedroom producers, but I just really knew that I loved the simplicity of what they were doing, and how they were taking like this really gnarly, aggressive like 808s and like this pop music that just was filthy at times, and taking the delicacy of her voice just maintained, and just that to me was such a cool contrast that I hadn't heard yet. And I was like, this is fresh, and it was actually before they really started dialing in her branding to what it became as well. And then as she blew up, everything just, I was like, this is genius. The whole thing is genius. I mean,
Mhm.
the songwriting, the musicianship, the way that everything was captured, the story behind it, and then the branding. I mean, I just think that that's such a good example of somebody that was like, I'm going to bring something new, that hasn't been done yet.
Tell me what you mean about the branding for her. What stands out about the branding for her?
Well, she's got this like Marilyn Manson thing going on. She went with, everyone, if you common theme in the music industry is, you got to be happy, you got to be upbeat. That's what publishers always want when you're going to pitch songs. Got to be happy, you got to be upbeat. In fact, I remember showing a Billie Eilish song to somebody I was collaborating with, like, that will remain unnamed, for a major label thing that we were writing for Sync, and he was like, "This is too dark. This is too dark." And then she blew up like 6 months later, and I was like, "Well, I couldn't have got away with that because I didn't have the artist pool, that she did. And I understand why that didn't work for me. But I love that she was able to do that, because when you can do whatever you want once you have the right audience.
Yeah.
Um, so that's what I loved about it, was just the fact that they were like, we're going to be dark as and weird, and we're not going to, instead of trying to, she's a beautiful girl, but she didn't play to that sexy side that she could have. She went to this really dark, creepy, she looks like a doll at times that is going to kill you. And I'm just like, I love it.
Yeah, yeah. When I saw them live, there was a lot of video projection behind them, and they did a lot. They made that really intimate, quiet, dark album into an incredible spectacle show.
Oh,
But I think that album's another example of they didn't have a record company breathing down their throat, their necks, whatever. They made it quietly in the bedroom for 2 or 3 years, right? And she said, "Well, I recorded that vocal under the covers, right?"
yeah,
That kind of small. They had time to experiment. Let's try the voice again. Let's try the voice again. Let's try the voice again. And he was working on his DAW. I think he was working on Ableton. They had time to experiment, do things wrong, do things right, do things wrong, do things right, find that sound that they both knew and loved, right? And now I've been seeing YouTube tutorials like how to get Billie Eilish's vocal sound, right?
yeah, totally.
Nothing wrong with that. It's great, but there's something that was empowering about them being their own producers, their own artists, their own laboratory of sound and stuff like that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think are some of the keys to an artist finding their unique sound, their unique expression?
Experimentation, like you have to, when you don't know what it is, you have to find it, and you have to be willing to be okay with not finding it right away or finding the wrong thing first. This just brings me back to what I was saying originally, is just I am a fan of taking action. Ready, fire, aim. You can always pivot, right? But it's a lot harder to get going from a dead stop than it is to just change direction when you're in motion.
That's great.
And you will find it, maybe not right away, but you try something, oh, that's not it. You try something, oh, that's not it. I've tried a few things, and then I was like, oh, it's a combination of those things ended up being that for me, and you just explore.
Right, right, right. That's great. That's great. Um, let's talk about the free gift that you're offering today. Tell me what the name of it is again. I got it on a piece of paper, but I've lost it.
It's called the Quick Guide to Producer's Lingo.
Okay, okay.
It's a
And
quick
what will
guide.
people? Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Now, what will people tell me some of that stuff? What will people get out of that learning producer
Yeah.
lingo?
I made this for my fellow artist songwriter, anyone who's ever like, what the hell are they talking about in the studio? Because I know, when you're around other producers and audio people, it's kind of like hieroglyphics or a different language, and so, anything from, eh, compression to comping and flying to pre-production to overdubs, it's like that language can be really intimidating. And I often notice too that artists are afraid to ask. Sometimes they're just like, oh, I don't want to sound like I don't know, so they just nod. And I'm like, okay, you know what, I'm going to put together this guide that is going to, and it's not, the thing is it doesn't go too crazy down the rabbit hole about a bunch of stuff that doesn't apply to you. This is the stuff that applies to the artist. Like when someone says, oh, that's a little boomy, or oh, that's a little bright, that's a little dark, like let's talk about what, just basically in layman's terms, what EQ and compression is, but it's very simplified in a way that I would talk to. It's almost like as if you didn't know what it was at all. Like if I was explaining EQ to my mom, this is how I would explain it, and I tend to find that actually works for artists as well. So
That's
quick guide.
great. It's really empowering. It's empowering for artists to have, if you're collaborating, if you're in a big studio and a small studio, even if you're Googling it, like why, how does EQ work? It just helps to know the language, to learn more, to be empowered, to ask the right questions. We have to sort of bring a certain, I've found I've had to do a certain amount of learning so that I could ask a stupid question to know what the hell I'm talking about to somebody, so they can explain to me, so I can learn more, basically.
100%. And that's where it starts though too, is like sometimes, oh gosh, that's the most frustrating feeling when you're like, I'm so lost. I don't even know the question. I don't even have the words for a dumb question, and that's a really tough place to be in. And so I think this will actually help with that a lot.
That's really great. That's really great. And do you find time? What kind of music are you making these days? Is it in your own artist side? Is your artist side getting much time to art?
My artist side is gigging a little bit. She's like, I put baby in the corner, and
Okay.
she's been calling me for a while. She's like, excuse me, I'm ready. And I'm like, I hear you, but I've been doing a lot of custom work lately. And I've also been doing a lot of artist projects lately where I'm producing for other artists. So my plan is by next spring to be releasing a new artist project that will be self-produced. And I also have some ideas about how I want to include people on the journey. So maybe pivoting some of my tutorials to not just be like, hey, here's how to make this song. And usually I'll create something just relevant to the teaching, but maybe be able to say, hey, here's this record that I made, and let me take you behind the scenes and show you my process, but then actually release a product after. You can tell I'm still hashing this out in my brain. I have not come up with the entire plan, but it's something I'd really like to do. One of my favorite YouTubers, Andrew Wong, does
Yeah, I
this.
think that's how it is.
And
Yeah, I love him. I love
you
his
know, I
stuff.
can Andrew. Yeah, he's so great, and a lot of it, pivots back to some music that he's working on for himself, which I think is so cool. So I'd love to be able to do that.
It's
Yeah,
funny. I've seen his tutorials, and I know Ableton reasonably well, but I've been thinking about taking some of his courses because I just wanted to learn. Ableton's so deep. He does things I don't do. I'm like, really? That would be great, right?
yeah,
But I think to what you're saying about your own artist project, my opinion is it's okay to like be kind of messy. Like I think I'm going to combine this and combine that. I think we always, as artists and producers, think we know exactly what we're going for, and then we think that part we did was exactly that, and it turns out to be something else, and that's fine. It ends up sounding like us, and I don't know. It's a funny thing between like how the tools relate to our ability, to our style, and our background, but it becomes something new and fresh when we think we're like really clear. It's going to be this plus this, right?
yeah.
But then it ends up being that, and that with a little tiny bit of this, right? So
I love that because it goes through our filter, which it like inevitably makes it unique, and you never really know what that's going to look like at the end. You can have a pretty good idea of it, and then there's those random times or those, that, oh, that's exactly how I was hearing it. But most of the time it's like, it's kind of this pleasant surprise. You're like, and you're like, I didn't even imagine it could have been that. Like,
w-
I think
w-
it's super fun.
right. No, it's funny. I think for me, coming out of the rock side of the world, where it was like, well, are we going to use a Gibson or a Fender on this sound on this song? But now when I'm doing synth parts, I kind of have a sound in mind, but then I have to scroll through and find something that I like, and I end up on one level finding the first thing that I just don't hate, so I can keep up with the flood. And but then some sound goes in a different direction because I'm in some synth and I'm dialing through sounds, and I got a sound that I never would have thought about, but suddenly I'm going with it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's part of the randomness of our musical creation moment that we're in.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when a sound goes somewhere that I couldn't have even imagined. You just, you pull it in like a sample or something, and you're like, where's this going to end up? And it doesn't sound anything like the original or like what you even imagined, because there's something to be said about executing the ideas in your head. And there's something to be said about just allowing the playful and the exploration to lead to what it's going to be and letting go of that control, which is so hard for me because I'm such a control freak. But it's so rewarding when you can just let it be you know
Yeah.
trust the
What
process. you know
trust the process? Yes. What?
that's what
Yeah.
one
What?
of my mentors said to me, that he would always repeat to me, trust the process. And it just kept ringing truer and truer, and he always said it as it related to that. When I'm like, I can't get the sound I want, and he'd be like, trust the process, it might not even be what you think it's supposed to be. I'm like, oh
Right. So how were you able to start to do that? What changed when you did do that?
yeah. What changed is that I was allowing, like I was just saying, to make way for what the surprise could be and where it could go by just exploring. So for example, I could hear a part of my head that goes like bada 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 bada, and that's like a melody I'm hearing, right? Well, or I could grab a sequencer that does the bada 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 and then start tweaking the settings on it to now where it's like bada 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 bada. Yeah, I didn't think of that, but if I just tweaked and I saw, okay, like kind of let the machine like work with the machine here and the technology, stuff like that. And then going, wow, that's even better than like what I heard in my head. So trusting the process and being willing to explore like that kind of opened up more things. We're only so creative. I'm okay to take the assistance where I can find it.
Well, yeah, I love that. Partly there's you heard that bada thing first, and that came out of you, and then you're open to the maybe I tweak it, maybe it's up, maybe it's modulates, right? So there's a
Yeah.
initial inspiration plus modern tool manipulation, and then you decide in the end which one did you like better.
Yeah, totally.
That's great. It's sort of the beauty of producing ourselves and producing other people with the tools that we have.
100%. And I find that it also applies to working with musicians in the studio as well. You know, I've had other times earlier on where I just heard something so clear in my head and I was like, okay, you play this and you play like that. And God, I kind of felt like a tool now that I think about it. Cause like, you know, now I've learned to be like, okay, I know what I want to hear in my head, but you know, great musicians produce themselves sometimes when they play. And I don't do a lot of capturing of like live stuff. I mainly work in the box by myself, but when I am working with other musicians, I tend to go like, what are they going to do? And then how, you know, let me kind of manage that from the sidelines and then insert, because they might do, once again, something I didn't even think of. Or maybe it's a combination of what I was thinking and what they did. Oh, I love that thing you did there, but can you make this tweak here? But instead of like micromanaging it and coming in and going, it has to be what I think it is, you know, I think that's a big part of growing as a producer, is knowing how to manage the moving parts rather than having to be in control of the whole thing.
Right. That's great. That's great. You know, there's a quote that I love from Todd Rundgren, the producer and artist, where he was quoted by Lenny Kaye when Todd was producing the Patti Smith Group, and at the beginning of the process, Todd said, "If you know what you want your record to sound like, tell me, and I'll help you make it sound like that. If you don't know what you want your record to sound like, tell me, and I'll help you find it."
Yeah. Yeah. I love
It's like
that.
we can kind of go either way. It's like, if you got a vision, I will help you execute. And if you don't, that's great. Good, let me know. I'll throw out some options. We'll find the sound together. So
That's awesome. That's
that's
kind of a similar path that I take when artists reach out to me. It's like, okay, send me some reference tracks. Where do you see this going? And if they go, you know, I don't know, I say, don't worry, I'll help you find it. And I hear the song and then I send them a couple reference tracks first. Hey, sounds like it could go this direction. You
that's
know,
great. That's great. Yeah, I think reference tracks are a really important part of the producing process. And the artists don't know everything that's possible, but sometimes I'll play them a record or a old thing or a new thing, and they go, that's even if it's not going to sound like that, it opens up possibilities, right? It opens up their brain to like, I was stuck in it this way, maybe it could be that way. So it's totally cool.
totally.
Anything else you want to add or tell us about, or I feel like we covered some really great stuff today. It's totally awesome. But thank you.
Oh
So
my
thank
God.
you.
Thanks for having me. I feel like I could talk about this like all day. So I'm like, don't open up, don't go down that can open that can of worms. Yes. How many hours do you have? No, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And to like any singer songwriter out there, you know, when I say like, oh, you know, I'm a producer, it's like, it feels weird sometimes to say that out loud because that's not what I wasn't always this way. I didn't grow up as like with a computer in the house or engineer brained, or, you know, I was a struggling singer songwriter. And so when I say like that, or when you say, oh, this is really confusing for me, or I don't understand this, or I'm struggling with this, like I feel you, I hear you. And that's my aim is to communicate with you specifically. And that's what I'm doing in my teaching, you know? So I hear you, I feel you, I got you, and I would love to help you in any way that I can, you know. And I think that this quick guide to producers, I know you have a link for this, David,
Yeah.
and drop it in the notes. And I think this is going to be a great start for you to help you just familiarize yourself with the language being used. You know, a lot of people that I work with tell me that this has actually helped them to communicate better with producers. You know, it's not always about, well, now I don't need producers and I'm just going to do this all by myself. Some people it will be like that, but even me, I'm a professional producer and I still work with other producers. And you know what? It enhances both of our experience that I know what I'm doing and that I know how to communicate exactly what I want and all of that. So there's really so many positives to being able to learn how to do this.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, yeah, the word producer has changed, so evolved. Everyone who's got a laptop can
I know.
sometimes say they're a producer, and to some degrees they are. But yeah, the rule, the names, the words, the meanings of the word producer has shifted. But I totally agree. I mean, I think you've learned how to, besides your passion for communicating and teaching, you've learned the tools, you've learned the artistic process for yourself. You know, you've been from a, screaming Led Zeppelin baby in your crib. I love that image.
I never
I
get
love
to tell that story, so I'm so glad that you asked me something that led to that because I kind of forgot about it until you asked.
It's so great. I know Tori Amos was a big Led Zeppelin fan when she was a child, so I'm kind of like, I'm seeing and hearing the two of you in dueling cribs screaming, "Lay down inside."
We would have been such good baby friends.
I'm sure you would have.
Oh,
Definitely. All right, so folks, thank you so much, Kris, for being here. If you have questions, we can post them in the Facebook group. Let me know what you learned. Might be able to get Kris to answer some questions for you in the Facebook group. And this has been a really and lively conversation, really fun. And thank you so much, Kris Bradley, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I'll talk to you guys soon. I'm going to press their end button and we will stop recording. Cheers. Oops, that was not the wrong button. I'm going to press the actual.